Hello, and welcome back to the Going Off Track podcast. I am Catherine, and this is finally episode 30 of our F101 Spring Break Sprint series, where, long story short, in case you are somehow finding me for the very first time in this final episode, I dove into a bunch of different pieces of F1 lore and F1 history from before I became an F1 fan midway through the 2021 season, hoping to educate other Drive to Survive era Formula One fans about the sport. Yesterday, in the penultimate episode, I covered that one time a driver on another team fired another driver on another team because it was funny. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss a video in this series, which the series is over. So just like and subscribe anyway for me. And also so that you don't miss a video all season long. We've got our Miami Grand Prix predictions already out, so don't forget to check those out before race weekend commences. And so I can continue to inflict my motorsport opinions upon the greater population. And if you're listening on your preferred podcast platform, please don't forget to leave us a 5-star review. So today we're talking about Jochen Rindt, and he's known for being kind of one of the big reasons why motorsport is so popular in Austria. Rindt is actually German, was born in Germany, but ended up moving to Austria after his parents passed away in World War II. So he ended up having the opportunity to choose which country's license he was going to drive under, which is why he chose the Austrian license. This is very similar to how Max, who has got dual nationalities, and Alex Albon, who has dual nationalities. They're not the only ones, but those are the ones who come to mind. Max drives under a Dutch license, and Alex Albon drives under a Thai license, whereas Albon is British and Max is also Belgian. Lando Norris is also Belgian and also British, which is why he drives under a British license. But they have a bunch of options. So Rindt drove under an Austrian license, even though he was born in Germany. He made his debut as the first Austrian driver in Formula One in 1964 in the track that was shaped like a hockey stick that we talked about in our F1's circuits episode, which is also linked down in the show notes. Unfortunately, he retired on lap 58 with a steering column issue, but considering debut correlating with reliability of cars back then, making it to lap 58, especially on a track shaped like a hockey stick, not that bad. He joined Cooper for his first full season in 1965 and finished P3 in the Drivers' Championship in 1966, also with Cooper. Following his tenure with that team, he moved to Lotus, the Lotus team that we have been talking about pretty much the entirety of this month. We have been referencing Lotus. It is this Lotus. He joined Lotus in 1969, where he finished with a P1, a P2, a P3, and a P4 as his only classified racing finishes that season. Everything else was a DNF. But this was, of course, still enough for P4 in the championship with the way the points shook out by then. I think back then you got 9 points for winning a race. Either way, would never happen in 2026, even with a shorter season, just with the way the points work. But I still thought that was interesting. Going into 1970, he earned his first ever win at the Monaco Grand Prix, retired at Spa, and then rattled off 4 straight wins at Zandvoort in France, at Silverstone, and in Hockenheim that gave him a very significant lead in the championship, which he won despite the fact that he did not finish out the season because he actually passed away right after qualifying in Monza at the Italian Grand Prix. There was a crash either during or after qualifying. I think they called it a practice session back then. And ultimately, by the time he made it to the hospital, he was declared dead. There was an improperly placed barrier, and just the way the car safety was set up at the time, it was pretty dicey. And of course, he is not the only driver, unfortunately, to pass away on the track at Monza, which we've also talked about throughout the series. Lotus would go on to withdraw from that race while his teammate John Miles quit the sport basically on the spot. And following the Italian Grand Prix, future F1 champion Emerson Fittipaldi would go on to take one of those open Lotus seats along with a Swedish driver named René Wiesel. Probably didn't pronounce that right, my bad, who had one solid season in 1971 and then would appear in various races to various levels of mediocrity through 1974. Following Monza, Rindt was up 20 points in the championship with 45 points over Jackie Stewart, who was actually a very good friend of his, and Jack Brabham, who we had talked about in the F1 family episode. They were tied for P2 with 25 points each. In Canada, Jackie Ickx, who would go on to win a world championship, but not this year, moved into P2 with 28 points. And then in the following race, the United States Grand Prix at Watkins Glen, Ickx would go on to finish 4th because he had some issues with his car, which meant that at the last last races of the season, he would not be able to overtake Rindt's mark, and therefore he was given the title posthumously and is to this day the only F1 driver to win the Formula One World Championship after his death. And that's just a very unique situation. I read that Jackie Stewart, who, like I said, was very close to Rindt, he actually passed the trophy to Rindt's wife at the prize giving ceremony following that season. And Rindt and Stewart were actually very close and worked with the Grand Prix Drivers Association, which we still have now, to focus on increased driver safety, which is a little ironic considering that driver safety was the reason why he died. But it's also kind of like the rules are bathed in the blood of those who are the reasons why the rules are there. And of course, now we have much greater safety features in the 2020s with things like the hands device and the halo. And that has been able to make sure that significant accidents like Ollie Behrman's crash at the Japanese GP, Zhou Guanyu's crash at Silverstone that they used all over Drive to Survive over and over and over, Romain Grosjean's crash in 2020 at the Bahrain Grand Prix. The safety features that we have now are significant in what we could have had once again if they didn't listen to these drivers and didn't take from these tragic incidents and adjust the rulings accordingly. Motorsport is an incredibly dangerous sport. Of course, there was a driver who just passed away recently in one of the endurance series that Max Verstappen was racing in. That also just goes to show you that there are so many safety improvements, but it's still very, very dangerous. So that was Jochen Rindt. This was the 2026 F101 Spring Break Sprint, where I spent the entire month talking about old F1 lore and F1 history. And I cannot believe that we are finally done. I cannot believe that the race weekend has begun, that Miami is here finally, and that is going to be a very interesting race, as Miami always tends to be, but we'll hopefully have a good one. We have some rules changes that I have talked about in our Miami predictions episode, so don't forget to check that out. Our Miami Grand Prix recap will be out on Monday after the Miami Grand Prix, which we will be watching this weekend. So don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss a thing as we continue all season long. I'm sure I will continue diving into more F1 history and whatever ideas I pull out of my hat. But thanks for going off track with me all month long, and don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you in our next one.